So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle from the ongoing RP series, which is being run on the official Discord. And today we do actually have a good faction against an evil faction. We have the Kingdom of Cardolan going up against the Kingdom of Rune. I believe Rune are the ones that are on the defense, at least on this map. Very traditionally, I've never seen the team that starts off on the higher ground be the ones that have to move forward. And indeed, I believe there are only 3 runic armies to the Cardolan 4, yes indeed, so there are 3 runic armies here in the higher sections of the map, and then the 4 Cardolan armies will be attacking from the lower section. It is quite a long one as well, 66,000 frames, but I would imagine that at least 10,000 of those frames are going to be the initial marching, because there is quite a lot of repositioning that has to be done on this map. But let's go through the army compositions. It will be relatively quick, because obviously all of them are playing as unified factions, just Cardolan and Rune, and obviously it is still on 0.96, so there's very little new that I can talk about with regards to some of these compositions. Greenwatch Garrison Archers, however, unstable thrower, playing as one of the Cardolan armies. Greenwatch Garrison Archers, like with most cheap archers of this type, are very, very efficient in 0.96. Again, not a lot of damage, but they don't need to have a lot of damage, they just need to grind down the enemy ammunition reserves, and then whatever damage they can do is just going to be a bit of a bonus. And taking away Rune's skirmish power is going to be very important, because a big part of the Cardolan armies in this case is going to be the Greenwatch Garrison Footmen, of course. The cheap pikes that Cardolan have, a very cheap and effective way to build your front line as Cardolan, but of course a bit of a problem with their morale if they are unsupported, and obviously a huge problem if archers manage to get a hold of them, because they have next to no armour, and also they have no shields like most pikemen have. So more archers, more Greenwatch units in general. We also have quite a few Miniska swordsmen, however. Actually, this is Arsal Ali's army, so both of them pretty much together, but it doesn't matter because obviously the compositions are going to be relatively similar. Arsal is also the one who sent me the replay, so a big thank you to him. The Miniska swordsmen, very similar to the other men-at-arms units, so something like the Dol Amroth men-at-arms, or the Gondor infantry, or the Arthedain men-at-arms. Miniska swordsmen cannot have their armour upgraded, however, but they do start off actually with a decent armour score anyway, and also a nice shield, so very run-of-the-mill sort of unit, but even so, it's going to be important for them to try and absorb what arrow fire they can as well, because obviously with Cardolan being the aggressors in this fight, they are going to have to indulge in a bit of attrition-based warfare. So we have some Wardens of Tirn Gorthad as well, very important unit for Cardolan, because it is, I believe, the cheapest morale buffing unit they can bring. Obviously most units that can buff morale are going to be on the expensive side because they're more elite. The Wardens of Tirn Gorthad, however, usually they'll sit right in the middle of a Cardolan line and buff that morale alongside the other pikemen, because it gives Cardolan's line a bit of a unified feel to it. But I doubt the Wardens will be committed in the first wave, because otherwise they will certainly be focused down by enemy archers. Better armour. Oh man, my voice is always seemingly on the way out. I guess it's because of how much recording I do. But yeah, they do have armour, so they will be a little bit more resistant than the Greenwatch Garrison Footmen, but even so, archers are still the way you want to go to kill them. We also have some Dunedain Rangers, potentially extremely useful if they can get into the right position. Could definitely be something to swing the match there. We also have some Miniska Sharpshooters, of course, the crossbows alongside the Minotaur Roman Guardians here. A very big part of what Cardolan are all about. Very, very strong in this area. Dunedain Captains as well. Something which Rune actually don't really have is a very skillful two-hander sword unit like this. So the Dunedain Captains will certainly be able to do quite a lot of damage there. And also we have the Royal Courthouse, the Rondor, multiple HP Lancers. On this map, I'm not sure whether Lancers are going to be all that useful. If Rune can keep their front line solid, there isn't going to be much Cardolan can do about that. As for Arsal's army, he actually has some Tharbad Warhammers as well as some Gwathlo Trackers, so some more lightly armoured archers, as well as some AP shock troops, very high tier AP shock troops at that. And then we have Von Mountain, who's got a lot of Greenwatch Garrison Spearmen as well. Greenwatch Garrison Archers, obviously all the cheap units. He's got some Merc War Chiefs. Most other factions have got a sort of unique two-hander sword unit they can bring on, heavy swordsmen. However, the Cardolan forces don't. The Mercenary War Chiefs is the best that they can do. Low morale, but then Cardolan have low morale anyway, so you can more easily make up for their weakness by taking that into account. Minotaur Roman Guardians, some Erin-born Axemen as well, so some cheap Axemen, very similar to the Greenwood Lumbermen from Dale. Obviously not very survivable, not very skillful, but off the charge they can do a decent amount of armor-piercing damage. Hearthguard of Amon-Sul, very, very resilient General's Bodyguard unit, of course, with those spears. Thieves of Tharbad, skillful, can do a lot of damage in melee, but very fragile at range, which is obviously going to be a bit of a problem if Cardolan cannot deal with any sort of runic skirmishes. Mercenary Cavalry are over here as well. And then the final Cardolan army we have is going to be Mac Thorn. He's got Greenwatch Garrison Footmen as well. Also some Greenwatch Garrison Archers, Minuscarithan Swordsmen, Minuscarithan Sharpshooters and Spearmen, so a bit more of a heavily armoured look to this army. Minotaur Romen Guardians, and the Trebuchet. Now the Trebuchet could be extremely useful if it gets into the right position, but of course Rune probably have artillery all of their own. There's actually, I think, yes there is a unit. There's a unit of Tharbad Warhammers right down there. We don't get to see this section of the map all that often. We've also got some civilians back here, and that's just about it. So now we'll move on to the runic compositions. Starting off with Inarius, so he's on the left-hand side of the map here. We have some Gamp Rim, some Variag Mercenaries, some Scion Rim as well, so I'd imagine more of an elite look to the runic force. Of course, it is an RP battle, so it is rather dependent on how they've set up beforehand, so they might not have as much of an advantage in terms of composition as you would expect in a traditional battle of this type. Eastron Clansmen are over here. Carmel's Chosen are there as well, so Valtroth Tribesmen. Overall, it does look like a fairly elite stack, to be honest. Gamp Rim, Dragon's Wrath Crossmen, and Eastron Clansmen. A few Clansmen here and there, but for the most part, a very solid runic composition. And of course, the Catapult, which catapults might not be as good as Ballista at sniping out enemy artillery, but they're certainly better at it than Trebuchets. So I would imagine that if Rune can destroy that Cardinal Trebuchet, they will definitely do so. Variag Mercenaries are here as well. Then moving on to the more central army, we have Enxvitz, who's got some Eastron Clansmen, some Scion Rim, he's also got some Valtroth Tribesmen, some more Eastron Clansmen with the armour upgrades, some Eastron Clan Guard, no, Eastron Guard, that's it, Eastron Clan Chiefs are the mounted variant. Eastron Clansmen are here. Variag Mercenaries, Gamp Rim, Eastron Hunters, and also some more Eastron Guard, Carmel's Chosen, and Eastron Hunters. So, yeah, a good mix of Rune's Golden Boys and then a few units of Eastrons to sort of buff them up just a little bit. Then over here we have Tundra's Fox, the final runic army. We have the Eastron Clansmen once again with the first level of armour upgrades, but not the full Monty. Then over here we have some Dragon's Wrath Crossmen, some Variag Mercenaries, Scion Rim, Flag Rim, Gamp Rim. You can tell from how Tundra's Fox is set up that he's immediately going to retreat, because over here, a bit of a wide choke point for him to hold all on his own against two whole armies, so he's probably going to retreat to this section over here where he can rely on the support of his ally and some higher terrain. But I will make a cut, because doubtless, actually hang on a minute, there is a couple of units down here of Chariot and the Carmel's Dragon Knights. Could be very potent, but I doubt they're going to just charge headlong into the Cardinal forces. They might, we'll see. I'll make a cut here. We might be rejoining almost immediately, but if we don't, it's because Rune have sort of retreated and Cardinal have had to move into position. Nope, Rune are going to go right on in with their chariots here, and of course the runic chariots have got archers on the back, which is in 0.97 actually. 3 factions will have chariots. Kharn will be having some chariots added to them, and they'll have crossbows, so that completes the trifecta of skirmishers. Rune have the archers, Linden have the javelins, and Kharn have got the crossbows. But you can see here they got in a decent initial charge off, but as soon as they turned their backs, the Cardinal crossbows immediately opened up and started dealing some pretty significant damage there. So I doubt they'll be trying that again, especially seeing as the only thing they really have to show for their efforts is killing off a few Greenwatch Garrison Archers. For a unit as expensive as the Trebuchets, you really need to be going after something a little bit stronger than that if you're going to sacrifice a good amount of your manpower on the first wave of assault. Yeah, and they're going to retreat back over here now, so I think we will make a cut here, because I highly doubt that the Chariots are going to go after these armies over here, because there was a good amount of pikemen in these armies here, and the Pike's bonus does confer against Chariots as well, so they would be madmen to try and go in there. So yeah, it will be another cut there after that initial charge. I'm actually a little bit surprised here. I mean, it's not as if Arsal had any real excuse to miss the golden chariots. They took an age getting over here, and yet they were still able to outpace the pikemen. Yeah, a little bit too slow on the uptake for me there, and now the chariots are in and amongst the archers, and the archers will offer no defence at all against the chariots as they run through them. Enxvitz does have to be a little bit careful though, because there are pikes all around here. I mean, the Warns of Tirn Gorthad are also going the other way. That's the wrong thing to do entirely. The Warns of Tirn Gorthad should be heading towards the chariots. Those pikes will do tremendous damage to them very, very quickly. I mean, it doesn't look like he's really defending these units at all well. And the Minotaur Romen Guardians here, there we go. They're very lucky actually they managed to get that volley off, because if they didn't and they took that full charge from the chariots, they would have lost a good number of their unit there. As soon as they pulled their halberds out, they would have been able to return that in kind, but I'd say Arsal's very fortunate there, because that was kind of sloppy the way that the chariots were just allowed through a gap, especially seeing as he had all day, basically, to see them coming. And they're gold. I mean, they don't exactly blend into the terrain. But regarding, again, they're still doing it. I mean, there's only 2 of them, but it's almost like he's willfully ignoring them. It's a very strange thing to do, because Chariots, even when they're depleted like this, are still capable of dishing out a lot of damage. And he's just content to sort of keep marching forward and ignoring them, but that's exactly what Chariots want you to do. Because then they'll find the gaps and they'll start doing a lot of damage, and the Chariots are still alive. Might be able to escape. I mean, at this point, there's no real sense in trying to save 2 of them. They might as well just try and get whatever kills they can, and they're going to get more kills here. They're going to go into the Greenwatch Garrison Archers. After that initial charge, I would have said that the Chariots didn't really pull their weight at all in this fight, but as time has gone on, they have managed to get a few more kills, and if they run right down these lines here, if they continue to go down the Greenwatch Garrison Archers, because at the moment it's only archers that are actually shooting at them, more to the point, there'll be a bit of friendly fire as the enemy archers try to kill them off as well, so that's more archers going down as well, trying to take away those Cardland skirmishers. The Chariots, are they going to come back again? I mean, the mercenary cavalry from Von Mountain is still chasing them. And as soon as the Chariots get caught by the mercenary cavalry, it's going to be all over for them. Going to try and coax them back into the stakes there? Possibly. See if Von Mountain falls for this, because yeah, there he goes, he's going to retreat there, and I think the Chariots at this point will probably retreat. Thunderous Fox hasn't actually retreated as far back as I thought he would. He's still in the wider section of the valley there. Well, the Runic War Chariots are still just going to shoot away. There's not many of them left, but still any kills they can get at this point are a real bonus. With the Mercenary Cavalry right there though, still these Greenwatch Garrison Archers are just running forwards with reckless abandon, and Von Mountain can't afford to just keep microing this 1 unit of Mercenary Cavalry all day, so sensing the opportunity, once again, Engspitz is going to charge forward and kill off yet more Greenwatch Garrison Archers. And the Chariots, I don't know if they're going to be able to get away again. Maybe they will, yeah they are. Real hit and run there. And again, that's not really Von Mountain's problem. He's trying to micro his full army into position over here. He can't be he can't be expected to babysit all of these archers as they recklessly run forward all day. But now they're going to retreat. They're going to come back again, and this is the problem here. I mean, it's a real waste to send these archers forward like this, because all you need to do is keep your crossbows in range, and the crossbows will melt them. We already saw what 1 volley of focused crossbow fire can do in the first charge that these Chariots have had, but they've been picking away at these Greenwatch Garrison Archers for some time now, and the pikes are lagging behind. The pikes are here now, which is going to make these continued hit and run charges a little bit more difficult, but you'd have to say that because these archers have extended past the stakes, it's no longer possible really for the mercenary cavalry to come in and do the business. The Royal Courthouse Thorondor could walk their way through, but they're lancers, and you don't really want to be expending your general's bodyguard unit on, well, too much of their manpower on just dealing with this. Of course, the more charges the Chariots do, the more stakes they actually destroy. More friendly fire as well. It's not a huge amount of damage they're doing per charge here, but still it all does add up. And the more archers they can kill as well, the better the runic defense is going to be. They'll be able to use their own archers on more important targets like the pikeman, rather than just these throwaway targets like the archers. And still moving through, and now we can actually see that the runic archers from Tundra's Fox in position back there are also now in range, and doubtless they will probably be trying to go for the pikeman. Another one of those chariots does fall, however, charging through the pikes. And that just goes to show the pikemen really should have been going after the chariots from the start when Arsal had the chance to go for them. So you know, have upgraded Dunedain captains there, as this one chariot tries to push their way through successfully, killing off a few of those Miniscarithalan swordsmen. There's some Guathlo trackers here. I mean, this one chariot, I'm sure it can hardly believe its luck, because still, both of these armies here, from Arsal and from Unstable Thrower, they seem to be just ignoring this chariot as it runs riot through their back lines. More archers dying as well. More Guathlo trackers there. The mercenary cavalry on its way up now. Now that the stakes are no longer a problem, surely Von Mountain will come forward and finally put an end to this chariot as it keeps moving around. There they go. Finally it dies. But not before causing a huge amount of havoc in the Cardland lines. Meanwhile, Greenwatch Garrison Archers in position, and this, I imagine... Oh, hello. We actually do have an engagement on the other side, a full melee engagement actually. Interestingly enough, we have Mechthorn charging forward to meet Inarius' runic army, but it is a combination of peasants and Miniscarithlin swordsmen actually, but the more professional ranks here of the runic army will be able to hold the line, especially with a combination of Scion Rim and Gamp Rim. That is a very, very tough front line to break down indeed. Miniscarithlin swordsmen shoring up the line. There's also the support of the Greenwatch Garrison archers here in the background, but damage, quick damage, is not really their forte. They'll be able to do decent damage against Gamp Rim. But with the Scion Rim there, with the thick armour, and with those shields, it's going to be very difficult to wear down this front line quickly. There's Carmel's Chosen's also here, so Inarius, sensing the fact that maybe Mechthorn wants to turn this into a bit of an elongated fight, came forward with quite a lot of numbers there to try and crush it quickly, but I think he then saw the problem with that, and that is that the Trebuchet is nearby. If it does score a lucky hit, the last thing you want to be losing is a whole bunch of Carmel's Chosen really quickly. Meanwhile, heading back over to here, yeah, this is definitely going to be the skirmish fight to end all skirmish fights, I think, between the two Cardlan armies and the one runic army that bars their path. But interestingly enough, actually, yeah, the Variag mercenaries are reloading. You can see how inaccurate the militia tier archers are, the arrows going all over the place. The Variag mercenaries returning fire, and Tundra's Fox really doesn't have much of a choice there. He can't afford to just let these Cardlan archers slowly but surely wear down his manpower. It might be worth his time to move forwards, actually. Tundra's Fox, now that I think of it, turn it into more of a melee fight, and then the pikes will be committed closer, and you might be able to shoot them if you take up some clever positioning, but I think if you were going to do that, maybe it would have been better to just sort of retreat back alongside Engsvitz's army over there. Meanwhile, still the melee engagement on this choke point is ongoing. Mechthorn with his Miniscarithlin swordsman defeats Team Certain. Only a military genius could win this battle. Very unsurprising there. They're going up against the armour piercing of the Gamp Rim and the survivability of the Scion Rim, with a few clansmen thrown in for good measure just to bulk out the line a little bit. Seeing as they're over on this side, they'll be the ones taking a bit of the arrow fire as well. Yeah, and there they go. You can see this is going to be a real problem for Cardman, because if they send forward pockets of infantry like this, they're going to start routing quicker. Cardlan are much more like the evil men, actually, in terms of their morale, rather than their fellow kingdoms in the west. Not exactly the hardiest in terms of their morale, and that could turn out to be a real problem, because they really don't want to be committing forward their elites early, of course, because if they do, they will undoubtedly become the target of all the archers and crossbows, the javelins that Room will have in store for them. Meanwhile, these civilians, the Carmel's Dragon Knights, trying to push their way through the civilians, holding their ground for now. I doubt that will last, however. Forward come the Miniscarithlin spearmen. Are there any crossbows close by? There are. This could be a bit of a... this could backfire on Engsvitz quite badly. I think he's going to go for the sharpshooters, but you can see the spearmen are over here, and it's not the best of charges either. The runic cataphracts are going to try and do what damage they can, but they're not really able to escape the now they'll be able to escape. Those civilians held on for quite some time, stretching the unit, making it a little bit more difficult to control, as the trebuchet is still a little bit too far away for my liking to actually do genuine damage, but that is a calculated thing, because the catapult could just get into position and try and snipe it out if they make it move too close. But with that in mind, I would honestly just keep the trebuchet's ammunition until later in the battle rather than trying to use it now. A little bit ineffectual for the time being. Meanwhile, the Carmel's Dragon Knights, they are shaken already. Not often you'll see a unit of knights get shaken so quickly, but armour-piercing troops in melee, spears. They're surrounded on all sides by garbage, and also now the mercenary cavalry moving forward. Under normal circumstances, they wouldn't stand a chance against knights like these. But they're going to be able to get away there, just about. Again, I can see what Engsvitz was thinking there, but he just got held up on the civilians for too long, and the opportunity was gone very, very quickly. And now the spearmen are moving forward another unit of civilians. Actually, that might be the same one that's returned from routing. Is it? No, I don't think it is, actually. Or is it? No, it is. They came back from routing and they're back for round 2. Unsung heroes there, because if they didn't hold on for as long as that, the Dragon Knights would have been more united and able to get better charges off. Well, Trebuchet firing in here to this choke point, but again, they're very unlikely to hit something. Even if they do, there's a good chance they'll actually hit their own men. which would be devastating for Cardland in particular, of course, with their very low, well, I say very low morale in comparison. I mean, if this was someone like Arthur Dane, they'd be able to hold the line much longer. Meanwhile, see here that Arsal trying to give Rune a taste of their own medicine, actually. Cardland actually moving forward, and there has been a calculated retreat by the looks of things. Over here is Rune actually giving up this bit of ground as well, which, I mean, now Cardland could move forward and get their archers to take up position over here. I'm actually a little bit surprised that Tundra's Foxes retreated all the way back here and not just in front of this hill, because giving up this high ground to Cardland does mean they'll be able to get their skirmishes into a very advantageous position. Those Royal Courthouse Thorondor, I managed to get a few kills on the retreat, and it wasn't on throwaway units either, it was on Scion Rim. But now there's anti-cavalry units sort of taking to the front as well, more anti-cavalry units I should say. Ones that maybe Engspitz won't mind losing quite so much. Eastron Hunters also moving in to give them a taste of archer fire on the advance forward. Miniscarithan Sharpshooters, crossbows moving forward, so Von Mountain has sent forward a chunk of his force as well. This hill over here is very difficult to move up, so it's unsurprising that the rest of Von Mountain's army is not moving up, but eventually I would imagine that they're probably going to probe both choke points, unless Rune intend to retreat all the way back to here. Of course, technically speaking, you could retreat all the way up there. Very labyrinthine map this. There's still a long way in this fight to go. Miniscarithan Sharpshooters in position, but also very depleted actually, only 37 of them remaining. And on the front line, these Miniscarithan Spearmen, it says victory is a distinct possibility. I don't quite know where the game is getting that idea from, because there are just not many of them left, and they're up against an armor-piercing phalanx. Victory seems certain. That is very interesting. I can only imagine it's because of range support they're getting from the archers, but even then, I don't think that these Miniscarithan units will hang around on the front line for all that long. Scion Rim trying to squeeze in. The Scion Rim by far the superior spear unit. More civilians are moving in. Miniscarithan swordsmen are moving in, as well as more archers getting into place as well. I don't know whether Mechthorn is going to have enough to actually really challenge this area over here, but one place on the map where Cardland will be feeling very confident is over here, just because of the sheer weight of numbers they had. They had two full armies as well as some backup from Von Mountain over here, which is probably why Rune are actually in full retreat. They want to get to a more easy to manage front line. And you can actually see up here, is this the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen? I believe it is. Yes it is. They're getting in position to try and use their split shot to devastating effect along a front line. So yeah, we've actually seen this tactic before on this map. You can see here as well the Carmel's Dragon Knights, backed up by the Eastron Guard actually, charging in there to try and do some damage to the Royal Courthouse Thorondor. Although it's the Greenwatch Garrison Spearmen, I think, which will be the true sacrificial pawns in this engagement. I mean, the Royal Courthouse Thorondor are here, but they really don't want to go into melee with the Dragon Knights. Even as weakened as the Dragon Knights are, they are by far the stronger cavalry unit in melee with other cavalry. Royal Courthouse Thorondor are faster though, so it'd be quite easy for the Cardland cavalry to avoid the runic cavalry. Meanwhile, unsurprising to see Cardland taking up position on the higher ground, but I think the runic forces are out of range, certainly from crossbows, but I think from archers as well, so very measured retreat this from Rune, and we are going to see, I think, a very grindy fight on this front, a very solid choke point. We've seen this before, of course, where the Misty Mountains were defending against some attackers as well. On that occasion, the Misty Mountains were not able to hold out, but the Misty Mountains don't have some of the quality tools that Rune have, especially Rangers. Rangers in this situation could be devastating, and I'm sure Rune have got at least one unit of shadow bows somewhere. And if they got into this position up here as well, alongside the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen, that would be absolutely lethal. I'm not sure whether they do have shadow bows actually. No, they do. Engspitz has got a unit of shadow bows, as well as Inarius. So at least 2 units of shadow bows, and if they can get up here along this line, and then that huge Cardland force which is moving forward, the body piercing ammunition could be absolutely brutal. Because that is of course something the Misty Mountains do not have access to at all, and they were still able to put up a decent fight. Rune meanwhile still doing a very good job holding onto this choke point over here, the Scion Rim of course. The rock at the front of this front line. You can tell it's You can tell this first wave is really coming to an end as the Greenwatch Garrison archers are thrown in with their butter knives. And Rune able to send them packing very, very quickly, of course. They knew they didn't stand a chance and broke almost immediately. Thorn might be running a little bit lower on manpower, actually, and considering that Rune at this point have given up their frontal position, I would imagine that Von Mountain's sort of units over here, he's actually sending more units up to that area over there, but I would say he'd probably be better off sending help to Thorn, because Thorn is going to need it a little bit more. There are already 2 full armies up here, as well as the support you've already committed, whereas Thorn is struggling over there, and his initial engagements have gone the way of Rune. He's not lost anything too important just yet. I mean, he's lost a decent amount of his sharpshooters, but in turn he has managed to kill off a decent chunk of the runic infantry with those sharpshooters. But if Rune smell weakness, they're going to come forward and counter-attack, and that looks like what they're trying to do. They see the sharpshooters are very close to the front line, and not much is in the way. There is another unit of civilians here now, but civilians honestly are not going to hold up against the professional runic infantry for all that long, I don't think. Cummel's Dragon Knights are on the way back over here as well, but the Dragon Knights are a little bit bottled up. It's not really a good opportunity for them to charge and get a clean charge just yet. Greenwatch Garrison archers moving forward, obviously the disposable archers coming forth, and they're going to get right up into the runic unit's face and start shooting away, and they see the shadow bows, which is bad news for Rune, because the one thing they really need to keep alive is their rangers. The rangers could be the difference between victory and defeat for Rune here, alongside other powerful units like their Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen. Even the javelins could be very, very useful as well. Cardland, of course, a little bit more armour focused for their defence. Variag mercenaries shooting away at the Dunedain rangers, so responding in kind. Both units of Variag mercenaries going after them as they try and get into a position to shoot along the runic ranks. Mercenary cavalry here, yeah, you can see the frame rate drops immediately as the Dunedain rangers start to open up. Camel's Dragon Knights continuing to push forwards. Mercenary cavalry are also here, sort of barring the way, but Rune are counter-attacking here. And Mechthorn a little bit thin on the ground. He is going to be forced into a bit of a retreat here. It's always a bit disheartening as the attacker when you're forced to pull back, as the defenders are the ones that actually start to push you onto the defensive. But I think there are limits to how far Rune will be willing to chase, especially seeing as there are rangers that will be shooting them at point blank. But Greenwatch Garrison archers, these Dragon Knights are being used more as a tool to break up these assaults more than anything else, which is understandable. I mean, on a map like this, it can be quite difficult to use knights to their fullest, especially when you're already in that position where you're sort of backs to the walls defending your choke point. Eastron clansmen are moving forward. They'll be overwhelmed very, very quickly. They're very good for militia units, but these guys are completely unupgraded, and they're also being swamped by all these Miniscarithlin units. Greenwatch Garrison archers are here. Rune will not be budged from their choke point here. And again, all it takes is a little bit of awareness to see that these Greenwatch Garrison archers have pulled out their blades, indicating they're out of ammunition. The last thing you want to be shooting is them in this situation. There is a unit of pikes coming forward. That's a lot of Cardland manpower that Rune are going to have to mulch their way through, but if anything can do it, it will be rangers and Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen and javelins. Rune also have the units that they need to hold the line. They've got Scion Rim, they've got Gamp Rim. Of course, the pikes will be able to outrange the Gamp Rim, but also I think the Cardland pikemen are going to have another problem entirely. They're probably going to be the main target for a lot of the runic archers. Eastron Hunters getting into position. The initial skirmishes underway in melee on this flank. Meanwhile, Thorn once again pushing forward with another wave of units. Rune have actually taken up a defensive position a little bit higher up the hill this time. There's some Flag Rim, but still a combination of Scion Rim and Gamp Rim will be able to hold relatively comfortably until Cardland really commit forwards. Again, units of Greenwatch Garrison archers that are shaken and out of ammunition, as well as ever decreasing numbers of Greenwatch Garrison footmen as they get showered by archer fire. That's not going to be enough to bring down a runic front line like this. You can see here the knights, they need to be careful. Some of them dying off there, interestingly enough. Not sure what killed that guy back there. But regardless, those knights probably need to get out of there at this point, and now you can see the flag rim wrapping around here, and they'll quickly be able to rout this force, especially with the armor piercing. I mean, they are likely to get shot in the side by sharpshooters, but it is a depleted unit, so they won't be mown down in just a handful of volleys like we saw befell the chariots. And of course the flag rim, very good unit to use against Cardland. A lot of Cardland's frontline forces are going to be a little bit more reliant on their armour, except for the pikemen. All of the Miniscarithan units, very good targets for the armour piercing flag rim, and the armour piercing gamp rim, of course. Already shaken. Spearmen a little bit more resilient in this in the face of these odds, but that will change pretty quickly, I would imagine. Some fire arrows coming in as well, so Rune definitely know how to deal with a shaky Cardland attack. Yeah, and I'd say fire arrows are a pretty good way for Rune to go about certain engagements here. If they feel as though Cardland are on the verge of routing, flick over to fire arrows just to give them that final nudge. Meanwhile, some sharpshooters using their crossbow ammunition. Still a long way to go in this fight. An awful long way to go, actually. That was an interesting shot there the trebuchet's making. Are they trying to go after the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen up here? Because those are awful shots from the trebuchet. Rotten, in fact. Greenwatch Garrison archers on the front line, taking fire ammunition. You can see they're already shaken. Even though this runic front line is actually looking pretty battered and bruised already. And that is the merit of using cheap pikes. Combined with a bit of support from those ranged units, and that is exactly how Cardland will want to go about their business here. Well, these Variag mercenaries still do have their bows out. Rune need to respond somehow over here. I mean, there go the Greenwatch Garrison archers, though. That's a problem. I mean, on this front line, with those numbers that the Greenwatch Garrison archers were offering, Cardland could have won this fight, but the morale letting them down there, the fire arrows doing their work. Ooh, a nice hit there from the trebuchet as well, right into the centre of a unit of Gamp Rim. Heading back over to this front over here. Yeah, Rune are going to be victorious as well. The Miniscarithan Spearmen, actually, we were just in time to see them rout. So Thorn has definitely had the lower end of this engagement. He's been struggling, but he's been throwing himself against what has been a bit of a brick wall. Fortunately, on the other side, things seem to be going a little bit better for Rune. More units coming forward, but he also has his Hearthguard forward now, as well as his crossbow companies and his rangers, depleted as they may be. Trying to get in position here to do a lot of damage to that runic front line before committing forward what's left of his infantry, I would assume. He's still got some spearmen, and obviously he hasn't expended his whole army yet, but certainly you would say that Cardland have lost a lot more trying to get up this hill than Rune have lost defending it. Let's see here. Still some Variag mercenaries just loitering. We watch Garrison Spearman in Skiltron formation, actually. Very rare formation in Reforged, that. I remember in vanilla Skiltron was very prevalent among the lower tier units, but now much less so. It is limited in its application after all. Use the sort of rear guard action, you can make your militia a good deal more resilient with it. Here come the Eastron Clansmen. The Greenwatch Garrison archers are moving forward as well. I mean, there are gaps in this runic line, but I think Rune have got them covered now with some more upgraded to varying extents Eastron Clansmen to plug the gap, and Eastron Clansmen will easily be able to defeat Greenwatch Garrison archers in melee. To be fair, the Variag mercenaries will easily be able to defeat them as well. Although any kills they can get on the runic archers will be a bit of a bonus, of course. A lot of these archers are wavering though. You can see how poor the Greenwatch Garrison archers are in melee, not only because of their stats, but also they rout very, very easily. Akin to the orcs, really, in that regard. Meanwhile, Greenwatch Garrison archers moving forward. Thorn still applying a bit of pressure over on this front. Some Eastron Clansmen over here as well. Just sort of waiting, and Rune have sort of retreated a little bit, sensing the fact that Cardland are squeezing in a little bit more with more skirmishes, another full unit of sharpshooters, capable of doing a lot of damage very, very quickly, of course. But Inarius has held this front line very well, bit of support from Engsvitz as well, those Dragon Knights helping to break up the assault, even if they didn't get many kills themselves. So Rune are feeling, if I were Rune, I'd be feeling relatively comfortable over here, because if Cardland want to come forwards, they'll have to cart the hill, and their crossbows will be much more difficult to use. Over here though, if I were Rune, I'd be a little bit more concerned because Cardland simply have so much manpower over here, and it's going to be, the play for them is clearly going to be to try and wear down the runic ammunition. But I say that, Meniskirithnan Swordsmen, a healthy unit of them routing, focused down, clearly focused down by skirmishes, and now more units are routing. This is the problem with Cardland. I feel as though if you're going to play as Cardland, you kind of need to commit forward quickly and try and do, well, that's why there's routing that's happening. Dragon's Wrath Crossbowmen doing a huge amount of damage, perhaps trying to assassinate this general. The loss of a general could actually be fairly significant for Cardland. They already have poor morale after all. Just giving them that extra nudge in the right direction as far as Rune's concerned may very well be a worthwhile tactic. You can see here the fire arrows proving to be the bane of Cardland's existence. But as I was saying, Cardland, I feel as though you need to get the job done quickly with Cardland, because if you commit yourself to an engagement of attrition like this, which admittedly on this map you don't have too much of a choice, if you commit forward everything, Rune are just going to use their rangers and Dragon's Wrath Crossbowmen and tear you to bits. But it's very difficult for Cardland because, again, they just don't have much staying power in melee with this routing at the lower end. If you want them to have staying power, you need to commit forward their elites. But committing forward the elites, of course, is going to draw the attention of Shadow Bows, Dragon's Wrath Crossbows, Baltroth Trismen, and that's not the sort of thing you want to happen. So it is a bit of a catch-22 for Cardland. They just, I guess, need to hold their nerve and hope that Rune do run out of resources before they do, and then they can utilise their more elite units to claim victory. Cardland do, after all, have a significant numbers advantage in this fight. A whole army, and a lot of their army is made up as well of their more numerous units like the cheaper pikes and the Greenwatch garrison units. I say that, the pikes are Greenwatch garrison units. Greenwatch, the land of Cardland militia. But now, upgraded Eastron clansmen and Scion Rim pushing forward once more. Once again having to fight Greenwatch garrison archers and Greenwatch garrison footmen in melee. And once again, the runic forces will not mind that at all. They will hold firm. And they do have reinforcements should they need it. Quite a few reinforcements actually. And Thorn definitely having to throw most of his army under the bus to get up this hill. But just the fact that he is attacking there does mean that Rune need to commit resources over here. Which means less for this engagement, of course, where Cardland are out there stronger. Or strongest, I should say. Some Eastron crossbowmen up here as well, of course. The cheaper crossbows, which I don't think Rune have got a huge number of them on the field today, but they will still be a significant addition, of course. Cardland's crossbows are stronger overall. But the runic crossbows, I mean, when they're up in a position like this, still have a lot of stopping power in their favour. But Rune able to throw off the initial assault. It's hard to actually tell where the Gamprim that are kneeling down are and where their dead brethren begin. There's a lot of damage done there quite quickly. That looked... yeah, that was crossbows, that was. Based on the blood spray, you can always tell when it's a unit with a little bit more heft behind it. And the sharpshooters there trying to do damage to that runic front line, and Rune have to just sort of stand there and take it. They could try and counter-attack, but that's, you know, Cardland will then just move forward in force. Some Eastron crossbowmen up there. I didn't actually know that you could get on top of this rock. It's a good position for crossbow to be in. But if Cardland push forward much further, of course, they will be at the mercy of the Cardland archers, which is probably why Rune don't want to go back any further. Meanwhile, a counter-attack down the hill once again from Rune. The Eastron clansmen pushing down, getting into the sharpshooters, the healthier unit of sharpshooters at that. Thorn still has a pretty decent number of reserves down there, but more being lost. And this unit of sharpshooters, I think, is finally going to fall by the wayside. They have got maces, so they will be able to use their armour piercing in melee. Here, I mean, the Hearthguard of Amon Sul are going to be a tough nut to crack on this front line, but they're committed in melee now, and surely they haven't used up all their ammunition yet. Again, the ammunition on the Hearthguard of Amon Sul, they're not an especially damaging archer, but in this sort of situation you definitely want to be using up all your ammunition before you're having to commit your elites to melee like this. So you can see those sharpshooters very, very quickly being picked apart. Hearthguard of Amon Sul, in combination with their fellow spearmen, the Meniskirithnan spearmen. The clansmen are now on the retreat, I think realising they're hopelessly outmatched by the Hearthguard. But with the support of the Scion Rim and the Gamprim, maybe a little bit different, especially seeing as, ooh, very nice indeed. If they can sort of get a crescent-shaped engagement here, with the Cardland backs facing that cliffside, those shadow bows will be able to tear into the back of this formation and do a decent amount of damage to the Hearthguard. It looks as though Rune are actually falling back in their entirety. Tundra's Fox, Inarius and Engsvitz all playing their part in that. Meanwhile, there's still no melee engagements happening over here. Definitely a bit of a... just sort of trading their ammunition at this point in time. I mean, you would imagine that in the long run this would favour Cardland just because they have more units. But we'll see. I mean, if Rune managed to save their Rangers, their Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen for the key moment in the fight, we'll see. Meanwhile, Cardland continuing to push forwards. Those shadow bows did actually leave their post, which is a shame because they could have got some decent kills here in the back, including those Hearthguard. But Rune's still fairly comfortably holding their ground. I mean, the civilians are coming back now. The Hearthguard on the front line will make a difference, but Rune's reinforcements are very close by, so if Cardland look like they're about to break through, Rune will simply commit some more reinforcements forward and Cardland will be back to square one. Now might be a good opportunity actually for Thorn to commit forward. Well, I say that. It's very difficult for Cardland in this situation, especially for Thorn because he has a limited amount of manpower. I'm surprised that Von Mountain hasn't got these units over here just a little bit closer. Tundra's Fox's shadow bows are on the way back now. The Eastron Clansmen were going to try and charge forward and engage the Chartreuse in melee, but they routed after just a single volley. The Mercenary Cavalry does have a bit of a gap, but the Eastron Guard are in position. Anti-cavalry unit. Baltroth Tribesmen also moving forward. And the Mercenary Cavalry, I think, thinking better of their decision there to try and move forward and get in behind Rune. Again, it's very unlikely that you'll run into a mistake that allows you to get in behind this early with your cavalry, especially not when there are so many reserves on standby. Rune have got a good amount of anti-cavalry units in their roster as well. The Eastron Guard, just one of them, the Scion Rim, the Gamp Rim, all of which can do a lot of damage. Those shadow bows though are taking a huge amount of damage. Cardland, you know, Mechthorn wasn't born yesterday. He sees those shadow bows, and any time they get onto that cliffside they're getting shot up. You can't afford to waste those shadow bows. If I was Tundra's Fox I wouldn't bother trying to do that again. It's very clear that that Cardland are wise to that tactic now. Still really nothing much happening over here. I can tell what sort of fight this engagement is going to be. This is going to be a very slow trading of archers. Don't worry, if it comes down to just this engagement where anything's happening, I will cut it out, because this is something no one really wants to watch in its entirety. Miniscarithlan Sharpshooters, that is not, I'm sure, what Unstable Thrower wanted to do. He's charging right in to the runic front line. Going to immediately retreat, of course. Fortunately, we do have this engagement over here, which is still ongoing. Hearthguard of Amon Sul. Miniscarithlan Spearmen. Civilians thinking of maybe trying to flank around. Looks like Cardland are going to win this fight over here. Forward comes some Variag Mercenaries as well. Unit of Dunedain Rangers. Both units of Dunedain Rangers lurking with intent there. I mean, they need to be careful. I mean, if the Dunedain Rangers get too far forwards and there's a unit of archers that still has ammo, they're going to be in real trouble. Variag Mercenaries, they don't have ammunition, however, they have pulled out their axes, charging in, and they should be able to kill off the civilians relatively easily. Variag Mercenaries, they're nothing special in melee, but they can certainly fight. There is a grand total of 2 crossbowmen in their banner carrier, trying to affect this fight in whatever way they can. The shadow bows are still there, you know. Here are the Miniscarithlan Sharpshooters. What are they going after, I wonder? And they're trying to go for the front line. It's difficult though. It's not the best shot. And the Hearthguard of Amon Sul defeat is a distinct possibility, and I would imagine that comes from the support of the javelins and now the reinforcements from the Variag Mercenaries on the front line. And there goes Thorn's general. Unfortunate for him, another melee engagement has erupted. The Miniscarithlan Sharpshooters fighting on the front line with the Clansmen. And Sharpshooters should win that as well. And then a huge amount of Greenwatch Garrison Archers as well on the front line. Supported by some Miniscarithlan Swordsmen as well, but you can see that this is going to prompt Rune to send forward some more elite units still. Oh dear, oh dear. That's a lot of damage done there. That immediately sends those Greenwatch Garrison Archers routing, unsurprisingly. That, I think, is the Dragon's Wrath Crossman's best feat. I mean, their ammunition is actually quite inaccurate. It's not as devastating as the Witches, let's say. Nowhere near as devastating as the Witches, really. But that is something it can still do. It can cause mass routes, especially in lower tier units like this. Of course, Cardland, a little bit more susceptible to that. Some strong clansmen back there. Sharpshooters getting shot by something. Very slow engagement this. The Scion Rim still holding the line. They've been very resolute here, and they'll be able to come out victorious against the Hearthguard of Amon-Sul. And it's getting to the point over here for Thorn where he's committed forward so much, he needs to make this worthwhile somehow. And this unit of sharpshooters also presumably out of ammunition, being committed forward now as well. Again, just more pressure onto the front line, more pikes are coming forward. I'm not really surprised to see Thorn taking an ever more aggressive stance, because they need to. Having said that, Inarius is retreating some of his units. I think they are sort of future-proofing here, Rune. You can see that some of their units getting ready in a secondary position at the, more or less, the top of the hill. There's very little map left to retreat to once you get up there. More archer fire, more crossbow bolts being poured in. These strong clansmen doing their bit. Chariot mercenaries have also pulled out their bow. Well, they still have their bows out, but they haven't really been shooting an awful lot so far. These sharpshooters, though, I mean, Cardland have been a little bit more forthcoming with their ammunition, which is understandable because they have more to burn. Rune, however, still waiting for the opportune moment to really do some telling damage to Cardland, but of course that can't happen until Cardland commit forward more fully. Some Greenwatch Garrison spearmen are on the way forward now as well. Some mercenary cavalry trying to sort of slip in behind the lines, and successfully as well. Rune dropping the ball a little bit there. There was no reinforcements there, nothing to block. And now Cardland, if they follow through with some infantry, they could really make Rune's life quite hellish. But there aren't any infantry nearby. Mercenary cavalry, of course, it's not going to be quite as devastating as if this were the Royal Court of House of the Rondor. But it's still a real problem, this, for Rune. They need to respond somehow. These strong clansmen will not be the response they really wanted it to be. Mercenary cavalry, of course, poor morale though, so perhaps Rune can count on the fact that they will probably rout before doing any significant damage. Look at this. They were wavering for a second there. Only in melee against these strong clansmen as well, although they found the real prize. They found the shadow bows. And this is the healthier version as well. I mean, Tundra's Foxes are still over here, but they took some pretty substantial damage, and more than that, they've already used up a decent chunk of their ammunition, helping to cleave their way through Thorn's assault on that flank. Whereas this one over here, they've been holding on to their ammunition, and it's not so much the mercenary cavalry are in melee with them and doing damage, it's the fact that now they've been revealed, and immediately Arsal is using his sharpshooters to try and kill them off as quickly as they possibly can. Good find that from Cardland, and it all stemmed from the fact that these mercenary cavalry were able, given free rein basically, to get in through Rune's front line. And in a battle like this, there's much less excuse for allowing that to happen, because really the only thing that these runic armies need to focus on is maintaining their front line and making sure their skirmishes are going after the right targets at the right time. And they weren't able to do that, which is surprising really, considering the players involved. But it is a bit of a weird chunk of the front line. I guess maybe you think that boulder will make it impassable terrain, but it's not. There is a gap you can use. Yeah, these shadow bows, the full target of a lot of those Cardland skirmishes, taking huge losses. The mercenary cavalry charging in, going to do some more damage to some more archers as well, so definitely a very successful foray behind enemy lines for the mercenary cavalry. They will probably die for it, but a worthwhile sacrifice there, and they're going to try and pull through the lines there. Rune, meanwhile, still using those fire arrows on this Cardland front line. Again, those pikes are there. Greenwatch Garrison spearmen. Their shields are actually very good, the Greenwatch Garrison spearmen. It's the best thing about them as a unit. But when they're pointing with their backs to the archers, that's not going to be coming into effect. Shadowbow's managing to survive, but Nearly half of their unit was killed there. They started off with 100, ending with 58. Meanwhile, Dunedain Rangers in a very nasty position indeed to shoot along the runic front line. Is this where Cardland finally managed to break through here? Possibly. I mean, based on how Rune are moving as well, it looks like they're actually going to retreat entirely. Yeah, they are. They're going to pull back. Pull back to this area over here. We're not even halfway through yet. And already, Rune are running out of positions to retreat to. Understandable, though. There is a naval helicopter right outside the window. I'm not sure whether the microphone is picking that up, but thanks guys, thanks a lot. Anyway, you can see here, Cardland forces, yeah, they're going to push through here pretty quickly. And I guess rather than try and defend this choke point here, Rune have just taken the decision, you know what, we're going to unify our armies and make it all about just one choke point. But there is the matter of trying to retreat without taking damage, and this is the perfect opportunity for a unit like the Royal Court of House Tyrondor to come forward and do damage. Albeit these Gamprim are here. Yeah, the Royal Court of House Tyrondor circumventing the Gamprim, going after some Easteron hunters. Forward come the cavalry, because now is when Rune need to try and... How well they retreat will determine quite a lot here. Because the Cardland forces here are trying to go after units where they can. A nice charge into the Easteron hunters there, that will do a lot of damage to them. Yeah, very, very nice indeed. Gamprim are here. We watch Garrison Spearmen in behind the lines as well. More to the point, they're going to lose these Carmel's shadow bows as well. Rangers are a big loss. There may only be 30 of them left alive, but that's still that's a lot of damage that you could do in a choke point fight with this unit, so Cardland able to find them and destroy them. Meanwhile, Cardland's mercenary cavalry are also forward, so Mechthorn, after a pretty bloody engagement for him, is now finally through. And he will be able to link up with his allies and they will be able to assault the runic front line together. And I think actually I will make a bit of a cut here, because at this point it's just going to be Cardland running these units down and also regrouping for another assault, and it's going to take them quite a while because their armies are quite spread out. And Rune are, of course, still moving into position as well. So, Cardland, you know, using the same tactics once again, just throwing forward these lower tier units. They will break before too long, but again, this attrition-based warfare is still what is being used from Cardland's perspective, and you can understand why. I mean, when you're the attackers, you don't really have much of a choice in many cases. On the map like this, especially not, because it's very choke point heavy. We'll see what Rune are able to do to counteract this, however. Scion Rim. See that the Greenwatch Garrison footmen being the target of Rune's skirmishes, trying to kill off those units which are very weak to arrows, which is good to see. Here are some Gwathlo trackers. Still hiding, of course, more skirmish power for Cardland. Still a lot of lower tier units which Cardland can afford to send forward. We won't be seeing the likes of the Tharbad Warhammers until the very end, I'm sure. Cardland continuing to push. Scion Rim victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to tell where this battle is really going. We're just a little bit shy of the halfway point, but I feel like now is a pretty good time to have a look at what the percentage of kills are looking like, and it is more or less at the halfway point. So we can see that Cardland do have the upper hand so far by 6%. And traditionally the attackers do tend to pull away with it a little bit more in the late game, although I'm not quite so sure in this case. Rune still have a lot of their important tools, they still have more ammunition in their Dragon's Wrath crossbow, not many volleys left, but they're still there. And they also have still one unit of shadow bows. Depleted as they may be the difference makers here. We shall see. So you can see I've jumped ahead a little bit in this engagement, because when it comes down to very grindy fights like this, there's a limited amount that I can really talk about without rambling. As you can see, some Gwathlo trackers actually once again, Cardland managing to find a little bit of a gap, and now they're going to start working up the lines. Again, Gwathlo trackers certainly not the most potent melee combatant, but Cardland don't need to commit forward their elite units just yet. You can see that Cardland are now pushing back against the runic defence. Very much a layered defence this from Rune. They're going to be relying on their skirmishes to do enough damage to the Cardland manpower as they force their way through each layer to try and make this worthwhile. But I don't know, I mean, it's I feel as though Cardland definitely have the upper hand in this engagement so far with how it's gone, especially seeing as the Rangers from Rune have not really been the most devastating. You know, it's in this sort of situation where you want both units of Rangers to still be in reserve. You can see there are those shadow bows over there, but I mean, they're shooting here. Again, I don't really think the time is right to be using the Rangers. I think just regular archers will do the trick. You need to save your Rangers until later on when you really need them, I think. Yeah, and they're taking damage as well, so they are being shot. And I think it's by the Minuscarith sharpshooters as well, is it? No, it's not from the sharpshooters, so it must be, yeah, it must be from the Greenwich Garrison archers. And again, very much a worthwhile target for these very cheap archers. If they can kill off the shadow bows, very, very worth their while. Meanwhile, this first defense has essentially been cleared out of the way now. Still 30,000 frames left in this battle, though. As we can see, another runic defense is waiting for them. The Scion Rim, taking a few hits immediately from the crossbows, but the infantry is going to get into melee with them. Variag mercenaries starting to shoot again with their flaming shot, but very, very depleted units, so the morale shock is not going to be quite as keenly felt. Crossbows once again piling on the pressure. Minuscarith sharpshooters adding themselves to the front line. Again, the Gwathlo tracker's already shaken. They're not really designed for melee combat of any type, but when they're out of ammunition, you may as well throw them in, especially in this sort of situation. Some Carmel's Chosen sort of wheeling themselves around. I think that, yeah, the shadow bows hit themselves once again. Unsurprising, considering the amount of range fire they were under. Still a lot of Cardland troops left in reserve, however. And this fight's still... In fact, the ranged units on this fight now, I think you can see both teams are trying to sort of save individual units for the late game. They try and really hammer home their advantage. We shall see, though. And again, there's another unit of Greenwatch Garrison footmen over here. This is the sort of target the runic archers will probably find too good to resist. It's not so much that they're a very powerful unit, it's just they're so weak to archers, you're bound to get a good amount of kills off of them. And at this point, Rune need to try and take away some of that Cardland manpower a little bit more quickly, otherwise Cardland are in danger of running away with this later on. Pikes down. Not really the best formation, they probably need to spread themselves out a little bit more than they're currently doing. Yeah, you can see already that Rune are targeting down the Greenwatch Garrison footmen. A huge amount of losses already sustained, already shaken. And I don't think they're going to be lasting on the front line for too much longer, honestly. Minuscarith swordsman. Coming forward to try and help shore up this line. Going around here. Again, doing that thing that they did on the last choke point as well. If Rune won't learn their lesson, then you might as well use the same tactic over and over again. As you can see here, the Minuscarith swordsmen getting in behind the runic line. They will try and work up the line as well. It's of course worth saying that the Minuscarith swordsmen are not the most damaging unit in the world. They do, however, need the Cardland assault to continue from the front if they're going to have any success here. The Cardland reinforcements are lagging behind just a little bit. More fire arrows. There are some Gamprim over here as well. And Cardland's assault, it was definitely the right idea, but they needed more reinforcements, I think, to take good advantage of this. Forward come the Scion Rim. Again, counter-attacking into the Minuscarith sharpshooters to stop them from firing, or at least make it more difficult for them to fire. Yeah, I think Rune doing pretty well in this engagement so far. You can see the sharpshooters being forced onto the defensive here. Greenwatch Garrison spearmen moving forward now a little bit too late. If they had come when these swordsmen had just managed to flank around, putting more pressure on this runic line, it would have been a little bit more successful, I think, for Cardland. As it is, though, a bit of a mini victory for Rune, this. That's certainly what it's looking like it's going to turn out to be. A bit of support coming across the way as well from the Variag mercenaries. Yeah. Gwathlo trackers are shaken. They still have some ammunition, actually, interestingly enough. Cardland shooting point blank, but you can see here that, yeah, this Minuscarith swordsman unit has been pulled apart. There's actually two Minuscarith swordsman units over here, I think, or is that the same one? No, it is the same one, they're just dying so quickly the numbers look different. And that means the Flag Rim are going to be able to move forward as well. These pikes are already pretty out of position. And they're going to feel the business end of those axes and maces that the Flag Rim wield. Swordsman there as well. Skirmishes Sharpshooter's defeat seems certain. Again, the Sharpshooters are in a good position, to be fair. Up on this hill, it means that they'll be able to look down and they'll be able to clearly see the runic troops and shoot them. Forward come the Gwathlo trackers. Well, the Gwathlo trackers are going to hold their position. Forward come the Flag Rim. Point blank shots, not a lot of damage done to them though in terms of kills, of course. Flag Rim decently armoured, got those shields. Gwathlo tracker's not the most damaging archer. Ghetto rangers, as I often call them, because they're like rangers but they don't have the body piercing or the damage or the high kill count. Gwathlo trackers very much the cheap alternative. Name brand versus great value when you compare them to the Dunedain rangers. Erenborn Axemen are coming forward now as well though, so some armour piercing on the front line, a little bit more of an aggressive unit, but this is only going to encourage Rune to use even more of their archers on the front line, because of course the Erenborn Axemen very, very weak as well, just like their pikemen. They don't have the best of shots, to be fair, the runic defensive line, and it is looking more and more actually like this line is going to fall apart. With the extra armour piercing on the front line, is that what they need to finally brush this runic defence aside? We shall see. Skirmishes Sharpshooters still here. The reinforcements are actually much closer now, which is good to see. There may only be Greenwatch Garrison spearmen, but they'll be able to move in should they need to very, very quickly. And the rest of the runic line is actually retreating. So yeah, I think these runic boys are just going to have to hold the line as long as they can. And hope their comrades can get into a better defensive position. They are killing off a decent number of Erenborn Axemen, as you would expect. Obviously very, very depleted. They look like low tier units from Mountain Blade Warband, the Erenborn Axemen, like the looters. They're actually pulling out now. And that's because the runic forces are routing, so once again, it's going to be another cut as Cardland sort of make their way into position. It could actually turn out to be a skirmish fight across the cliffs here, which I'm definitely not going to watch. But yeah, we're gonna cut until Cardland continue their assault on another choke point. I was going to say, perhaps a bit of a mistake here, as the Minotaur Roman Guardians were allowed up here, and based on the pathfinding, Rune have to go here and then there to get to them. Rune, however, managing to salvage the situation pretty quickly. The Minotaur Roman Guardians are going to be forced onto the defence as the Flag Rim move forward, but just the fact we're seeing Minotaur Roman Guardians now is a sign that elite units are going to start to come into play a little bit more so, especially from a Cardland perspective. We really haven't seen a great deal of them so far, while their units still a little bit further back. Minotaur Roman Guardians not half bad in melee, to be honest with you, but they definitely don't want to be using their crossbows like this to have to deal with a unit of Flag Rim over here. Erenborn Axemen are moving forward. The Minotaur Roman Guardians are very keen to get up onto this higher point of ground and use their crossbow ammunition, but I can't help but feel that even if they do, they're going to be focused down by runic crossbows pretty quickly. And runic archers. I mean, the Minotaur Roman Guardians are pretty hardy, pretty tough to kill quickly. We can see here that Rune holding the line resolutely with their Flag Rim. Only Greenwatch Garrison spearmen coming after them, of course. You can see very depleted units of Variac mercenaries breaking up the advance of Cardland. But still, those Cardland crossbows have been a real pain in Rune's neck. And I think Rune are going to be forced to retreat yet further. I mean, they're committing forward another unit of Flag Rim, but I'm not sure whether that's needed. The runic catapult is finally losing some of its ammunition though. And missing both shots, of course. But they have managed to save their catapult until this late stage of the battle. But Cardland also still have their trebuchet. This is where both pieces of artillery could come into real effect, and they could honestly decide the battle. Artillery can be so devastating, but then it could also just be a cameo role from them, especially for a trebuchet. Trebuchet, you either get a fairly disappointing performance or an extremely impressive performance based on what they're able to hit with their lower accuracy. Meanwhile, the Flag Rim still holding the line. They're going to get some support from the Gamp now as well. Erenborn Axemen routing very quickly, and the Minotaur Roman Guardians left with very little support actually. A little bit of friendly fire from their own sharpshooters as well. And sharpshooters getting into position as Rune once again form up another defensive line. It has been a very layered defence here from Rune. It's been a layered defence in the good sense. And I can't stand it when people just commit forward with tiny little micro layers and just their defences are punched through one at a time. Here, however, they've been substantial enough that if Cardland wanted to do that, they'd have to commit forward a hugely substantial force, and of course if they had rangers, crossbows, all that sort of thing, Rune would have been able to use to their advantage as well. So very savvy play this from Rune, and Cardland forced back. This assault nowhere near substantial enough. Too much of their strength is still way back over there. And now, maybe a bit of a counter-attack from Rune. As they come forward, the flag rim, victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. Now coming forward, the Scion rim. Oof. Direct. Let's see here. Victory is a distinct possibility, defeat seems certain. Misgarithlan sharpshooters. Yeah, I mean, Rune are continuing to move forward, and there's nothing really substantial to stop them from doing this. I mean, Flag Rim are stronger than anything that Cardland's got in the way. Greenwatch Garrison Spearmen are very poor in melee after all, and the sharpshooters, while they are macemen in melee just like the Flag Rim, they are not as strong in melee. Flag Rim are a dedicated infantry unit, whereas sharpshooters are hybrids. Really outside of Linden's hybrids, because of course being elves, they're a little bit different. Hybrid units do sacrifice a little something, usually in their melee component. Now usually at range they're just as strong as a normal unit, but in melee, while they are good, they're often not as strong as the dedicated melee variant. And I think this is what's going to prove to be the case here. I mean, the sharpshooters are already pretty depleted, to be fair, and the Flag Rim will just be coming in to mop up. Continuing this counter-attack down the hill from Rune. Cardland have made it all the way up here, but now forced back, and they're going to need more reinforcements. It does look as though Von Mountain is now going to commit forward more of his men. There's still units all the way back round here. Or back down here, I should say. Tharbad Warhammers and the like. I would worry for Rune in that sense that I'm not sure they have enough to take on several units of Dunedain Captains and Tharbad Warhammers at the sharp end of the fight. Indeed, there are a unit of Tharbad Warhammers coming forward now. I don't know. Now you can see over here as well, Archer Fire coming as the side of the Flag Rim. Was that Dunedain Rangers, I wonder? There's Rangers way back there. The Trebuchet, that looked like a hit actually. And it was a hit. Very fortuitous one as well, right into the centre of the Gamp Rim formation. Dragon's Wrath Crossman right at the top of the hill. Catapult still waiting for its opportunity to shine. Still though, I mean, Rune, they've got a lot of strength down here. I think with the Tharbad Warhammers, that should be what Cardland needs to stabilise things. I still think maybe another unit of infantry on the front line for Cardland will be needed to really hammer home their advantage here. There's a hailstorm of crossbow bolts there. Well, they're trying to send forward the Royal Court of House Thorondor, although I'm not really sure they're going to be able to achieve much even if they do push their way through. Very weak unit of Flag Rim over there now with some support. Numbers, of course, can be a very, very difficult thing to overcome. Here the units from Tharbad. That's a pretty neat, like, the Tharbad Warhammer's officer. He looks the same, only he's got a round shield and a sword. That's pretty neat. Meanwhile, Variag Mercenaries shoring up the line. The Royal Court of House Thorondor actually are able to bypass the front line and are now going to try charging up the hill. Where are they going to go though? Because there's Gamp Rim and crossbowmen all over the place. I mean, doubtless they're going to try and charge the crossbowmen. But, I mean, they need to make up their mind quickly here, because otherwise they're just going to get shot. And so you can see here the Variag Mercenaries. The Royal Court of House Thorondor did charge in. That should be a nice charge as well. They need to cycle out though, because here come the crossbow bolts. That is Arsal's general as well. As we've already said, Cardland losing their general could affect them more than other human kingdoms, especially from the west. Tharbad Warhammers fighting hard on the front line, already doing a lot of damage. Of course, those big hammers that they use, armour piercing. Gamprim shuffling their way forwards as well. More spearmen. Gamprim pulling back as well, so I would imagine here, yeah, Cardland are just going to mop this up and then they're going to charge up the hill for what will presumably be the final engagement, because Rune can't really afford to indulge in this sort of thing for too much longer. They're going to need to commit fully, because otherwise Cardland are going to slowly bleed them out. So here we go, it's looking like this will be the final engagement. There was actually a unit of spearmen that charged in, but they immediately routed. There has been a bit of a skirmish fight going on. There's also rotting meat and flaming boulders being traded between the artillery pieces into one another's reserves, but I don't know if Rune have really got enough reserves left. I mean, they have some Cardinals Chosen, a couple of units of Cardinals Chosen, a decent amount of Javelins, but melee units I'm not so sure. I mean, Cardland once again sent packing here. Is this going to turn into yet another skirmish fight that I'm going to have to cut? Because that was I thought that was going to be sort of like the beginning of the final engagement. But so much of the Cardland forces are still way over there. I don't know, I guess there are more units moving forward, but it's only Guathlo trackers. They're very unlikely to achieve much of anything in melee, especially seeing as they're already wavering. They'll only need to make contact with the Gamprim and they'll immediately rout. In fact, they routed before then. Fun. Sharpshooters and spearmen taking damage as well, marching through the rotting meat. As if Cardland needed any more excuses to rout. Forward come the footmen as well, but again, this is not a substantial enough force. I mean, they're presumably coming forward to waste a bit of ammunition, but I don't know, I mean, the more manpower they take away from Cardland, the more Rune will probably fancy their chances. Well, I guess it'll be another cut if this is how the war is going. Of course, those infantrymen routed on contact pretty much, including the sharpshooters actually, and this of course has left the Minotaur Roman Guardians very, very exposed. The catapult crew has actually come down the hill, presumably out of ammunition, so they and the flag rim have come forward. It would actually have been better if they hadn't done this, because now they're the ones at the front, and catapult crewmen are useless in melee. It would have been better if they just let the flag rim take that. Catapult crewmen are really only useful as meat shields, which I think is how Thorn is trying to use his trebuchet crew, so the artillery will no longer have any sort of impact on this fight. We shall see. I mean, we're more or less getting towards the final 10,000 frames at this point. Still a lot of Cardland forces back there, but I think we're finally going to see now the final engagement, the decisive engagement at the very least. We'd certainly hope so anyway. Let's go up to ×2 speed actually to speed this along a little bit. Very grindy fight this. And of course there's nothing wrong with that, but it does leave me with little to talk about in those very elongated skirmish fights, which is why I'm going to cut them out. Because there's really nothing that I can talk about. You know, they're going to be trading ammunition for quite some time. We watch Garrison Spearmen and Erin Vaughan Axeman. Once again, it's lower tier units. Carmel's Chosen and Flagrim will be very comfortable here. These Gamprim over here, though, being overwhelmed. They are, however, receiving a little bit of support from the archers that Runes still have left, which is good to see. The Erin Vaughan Axeman, of course, very weak to that sort of thing. I'm not really sure what the Greenwatch Garrison Spearmen are hoping to achieve here. I mean, they're going after the Eastron Crossmen, I get that. But they're well behind enemy lines. It's obvious they're going to rout very, very quickly. Already taking a good amount of damage there, as you can see. Now, though, this is it. Ooh, dear, oh dear. Look at those Erin Vaughan Axemen getting absolutely butchered by the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen. Very nice. However, the Dunedain captains are here, the Tharbad Warhammers are here, and I think that was the final volley from the Dragon's Wrath crossbow, so they're going to go in and engage the Dunedain captains, 2 elite units. Once again, the upgraded, especially Dunedain captains, should have the better of this fight, but the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen will not go down easily. And this is it. This is where Rune win or lose the fight for me, because they're committing forward everything, and they need to commit forward everything now, because they've already committed forward such a hearty chunk of their infantry that if they lose this engagement, they simply won't have enough to survive again. And you can see actually that the Carmel's Chosen, another unit of them, are on their way down. They still have 2 more in reserve, so there were 3 units all in all. Here are the Merc Cavalry. What they will be able to achieve in this sort of engagement is quite limited, I think. The Eastron Crossmen also shooting back in response to the Cardland forces. I think Cardland just have too much left in reserve for Rune to withstand this. Here come the Carmel's Chosen as well. It has been a very gamely performance from Rune, but ultimately it was always going to be difficult. And I feel as though it might well come down to how well they were able to use those shadow bows. I mean, here are the shadow bows now. Do they still have ammunition? Are they in a good position to shoot? Tundra's Fox, I think he used his a little bit too early, and they were killed off pretty quickly as well by the counter skirmishing from Thorn. And then Engsfitz as well. I mean, a lot of these shadow bows, I mean, they are taking a lot of damage now as well, as you can see. They need to either move or start shooting. But those mercenary cavalry worming behind the line from Von Mountain, pretty critical point of the fight, that, you'd have to say. Dunedain captains pushing their way through, actually, and that might not be the best thing to do, because the Dragon's Wrath crossbows are still there, the Carmel's Chosen are still there. I think they're going to get overwhelmed here. Meanwhile, over here, Arsal's Tharbad Warhammers are in amongst it. Oh my word, look at that. Huge amount of damage done there to, once again, the Carvelin front line, taking away their manpower. Tharbad Warhammers taking javelin fire. Carvelin being made to work for this, certainly, but I just don't think Rune have got enough left to... Well, I mean, many more volleys like that, and I might have to change my assessment, because that was absolutely lethal. I haven't seen the split shot variant of the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen do that much, well, consistently this much damage over the course of a battle since they were changed. Of course, they used to have the same projectile as the Witchers, and we know how lethal that can be. Victory seems certain for the Tharbad Warhammers.
If we continue like this, we will smash the enemy.
Yeah, it is looking pretty good for... Well, I say that, that's a big volley of crossbow bolts there into the Tharbad Warhammers. But over here, I think Rune, they are starting to run out of manpower, even with the support they were getting from those Dragon's Wrath crossmen. It's really only the Carmel's Chosen and the Catapult crew that are left. And Cardland will have the infantry to take advantage of a gap here. There's still some units they can use to try and plug the gap, but I think it's a losing battle at this point for Rune. How much damage can they do though? Again, there's units in reserve, but the time for reserves is over. You've committed forward far too much to leave anything in reserve at this point, really. You may as well just throw everything in that you have in melee and then support it with what you have left from a range perspective and see what you can accomplish. Again, it's not beyond the realms of possibility, especially with a faction like Cardland. You could rout them.
The enemy are badly bloodied. They have lost half their men.
Carmel's shadow bows are fighting. Again, these Royal Court of House Thorondor from Arsal getting in behind the lines, harassing the Carmel's shadow bows once again. A lot of dead Baltroth tribesmen on the floor there. Those Dunedain captains, however, have been shown what for. They tried to push through the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen and took a lot of damage. And then the Carmel's Chosen were the only thing that awaited them on the other side. There goes another general. What's that, Arsal's general then? This is from his perspective. It must have been. Very strange indeed. Unstable thrower. That was another volley there from the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen, who have certainly pulled their weight in this fight. That much cannot be denied. Carmel's Chosen taking some shots in the back, however. I think there's crossbows shooting them in the back as well, so that's not great for them. Rune, I think they'll be able to hold against this assault, but Cardland will be able to come again. And I don't think Rune will be able to stand up to another assault. I mean, these Eastron crossmen, they're going to do their best with the skirmishes they have left, but here come the Dragon's Wrath crossbows. That's much more what I expect from the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen with their current projectile. Sort of shooting, but not really hitting a great deal. Forward comes some mercenary war chiefs, trying to overwhelm the Carmel's Chosen. What have we got here? Dunedain Rangers moving forward. They pulled out their swords at this point. Lord Court of House Thorondor now in the back lines. This could be devastating for them, I think. The final blows. Charging into the Baltroth tribesmen. They do manage to get one volley off before they get charged, but that's a lot of damage done. And I think this is the killer blow, this cavalry in behind the lines, the Dunedain Rangers closing with the Carmel's shadow bows. Yeah, I think we can see now that Cardland going to start to pull ahead a little bit. I mean, that's still only 3% ahead. But you have to remember, they have more manpower. A lot of what Cardland have left are skirmishes as well, so when it comes to... this... I mean, the shadow bows have revealed themselves, but if you had a unit of Carmel's shadow bows, what are you doing keeping them until this late in the fight? Surely they had to have revealed themselves sooner than this. Because now it could be too late, because now the Royal Court of House Thorondor, they're going to see the shadow bows and they're going to charge into them immediately. No, I'm sorry, that's a poor mistake. Very poor. You've got to commit them sooner than that. Like, there were so many blobs of Cardland forces that came forward, and you could have finished them off so quickly. I mean, Rune are going to win the frontline engagement, but think of how quick those engagements would have been if the shadow bows had come forward. And I feel as though this is an example of being too conservative with your troops. You had a full unit of shadow bows with ammunition, and you didn't use them. And Cardland continuing to pour forward. If Rune, I mean, you know, Rune could still win it. But I mean, the shadow bows now, they're going to occupy a huge amount of the attention of what's left of the Cardland cavalry. Before now, Rune had a strong enough front line that the cavalry would not have been able to punch through it. You know, there was Gamprim on the front line, all sorts of support. But now... still these horsemen and still these shadow bows. The rangers harassing them. All of the Cardland skirmishers that are left are obviously going to be shooting at the shadow bows now. There's these strong crossmen taking a charge from what's left of the Royal Court of House Thorondor. I mean, to be fair, Cardland need to pick up the pace a little bit. Those shadow bows are distracted for the time being, but that won't last forever. And if they take too long, those shadow bows will be able to pretty nasty amount of damage if they turn their attention on them. These Carmel's Chosen surrounded. The gap is widening a little bit. I think Cardland are being too slow though, and I think if Cardland do end up losing it, it's because they've kept far too many troops too far away from the fight. Down here, the enemy skirmishers would not have been able to hit their units if they were way down here. The catapult's out of ammunition. They needed their reinforcements to be here, not way back over here, useless and too far away from the fight to reinforce. Meanwhile, Valchol Tribesmen being engaged again by the Dunedain Rangers. The other unit of Rangers coming forward to stop the shadow bows from shooting. I mean, if Rune are going to pull off this win, they need the shadow bows to get into position now and shoot. If they don't, then Cardland will overwhelm them. The Wardens of Tir Gorthad are on the way forward, and they'll be able to hold a unit like the Carmel's Chosen at bay. Another unit of Rangers pouring forwards, another Runic General falling. I'm shocked, actually, that they kept that unit of shadow bows in reserve for this long. Because they still had ammunition, they still had their bows out. If you had put them here, when that initial Cardland engagement had happened, in conjunction with those volleys from the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen, you could have routed that entire assault and not lost a lot of melee infantry for it. And then you would have been able to hold against another Cardland wave. And honestly, what's left of Cardland is not the most scary army in the world. They still have a few units of quality like Dunedain Captains. There's the Thieves of Tharbad, which are pretty far away. But it wouldn't have been insurmountable. The shadow bows are now up on the hill, but it's probably going to be too little too late here. And you can see that Arsal is doing exactly the right thing. He's continuing to pull through. You know, these Rangers are obviously going to die, the Dunedain Rangers. But if they can stop the Carmel shadow bows from firing for just a little bit longer... forward come Cardland. Some Baltroth Tribesmen at the top of the hill there. We watch Garrison Archers. Forward come Cardland en masse. The Carmel's Chosen that were over here finally finished off by the mercenary war chiefs. Wardens of Tir Gorthad coming forward, so that's 2 units of Wardens of Tir Gorthad. Yeah, I think this fight has gotten away from Rune. Oh, it's heartbreaking to see those Rangers kept in reserve for so long that by the time they were committed, the match was already in favour of Cardland so heavily that it would have been a miracle for Rune to come back. Too conservative, and like I say, you know, being too conservative is a killer. It's so bad sometimes. keeping too much in reserve, holding too much back, being too, I guess, defensive in nature. Sometimes you just need to grab the bull by the horns, be a little bit more aggressive with what you have. And in the end, Rune may be a little bit too eager to retreat, a little bit too eager to keep stuff in reserve. And in the end, they are going to pay for that. Because, you know, Cardland, they haven't done anything too special. I mean, that mercenary cavalry in behind the lines to find that those shadow bows was a good move. But Cardland have done a very by-the-books assault here. You know, wearing the enemy down with your low tiers, cranking up the pressure as the battle goes along. So it's nothing too out of the ordinary we've seen from Cardland. And Rune did have the tools to make Cardland's life hellish here. It's a very good map to defend on. Rune had pretty much all of their good skirmishes except for the Sapphire Bladesman. So I do feel as though Rune could have won this. I do feel as though it was hard for them. Cardland went into the match as favourites, as a, you know, greatly numerically superior army often will. But yeah, I mean, in the end, Cardland deserving victors, I think, as this fight continues. Victory is a distinct possibility. You can see over here the Baltroth tribesmen just being overwhelmed through sheer numbers from the Greenwatch garrison archers. And look at this over here, shadow bows. I mean, this I imagine will be the argument that the defenders would use. Like the shadow bows, as soon as they revealed themselves, they got shot to bits. But the only reason that they got shot to bits is because they're the only target at this point in the game with your armies so depleted that's worth going after. If you had committed them sooner, shot along the runic line, or shot along the Cardland line I should say, you would have been able to break the Cardland line very, very quickly, and then Cardland, it would have been panic stations for them. In the end, you left it so long that they were the only unit that's worth going after with these Minotaur Roman Guardians, because the Cardland infantry is now so numerically superior that Cardland don't need ranged support to win the melee fight. Well, some Dundine Rangers from Unstable Thrower coming up here. I think it's about time as well we go up to ×2 speed, because the overall result of this fight is now going to be very clear for all to see. Shaken. Those Baltroth tribesmen. Victory seems certain for the Dragon's Wrath crossbows against the Wardens of Tirn Gorthad, but that is a consolation engagement only, really. And again, over here, it's like little hidden gems like this. You can see one of the Wardens of Tirn Gorthad with their armour, only he doesn't have the helmet, he's got a hood, and he's got a longsword. Neat little officers like that. Line captains. Baltroth tribesmen broken and fighting to the death. The Carmel's Chosen won't break. I'm sure they're not morale like most units of that type are. But they're going to die off pretty quickly now as the mercenary war chiefs come in. It's going to be the end of them. Dragon's Wrath Crossmen, I think, are going to be the last ones yet, because the Baltroth tribesmen are dead to the last man. Carmel's Chosen all up in here. There goes another general. Just one Carmel's Chosen left alive and in amongst the mercenaries. He's fighting hard there, but you would imagine the mercenaries with their Zweihanders will be able to kill him off sooner rather than later. He's going to get back up. There he goes, dead. Passed around by the Rangers and the mercenaries, and here we go. Final engagement. Backs to the walls from the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen. And the Wardens of Tirn Gorthad going to force them up against those walls and poke them to death. Very hard fought fight though, and as we can see, close as well, just within the 10%, which the more players you get, the less likely it is that you're going to have a match that ends within 10%. Brutal fight though. Well played to both sides though. Neither side did an awful lot wrong, except, I would say, for the misuse of the Runic Rangers. And the Rangers were always the key for Rune. If they were going to win, it was always going to come down to their Rangers. But yeah, obviously Rune getting more kills because Cardland had to be the attackers in a very difficult map to attack on. But let's see what did the damage for Cardland. So I would imagine, yeah, Miniscarith and Sharpshooters getting a lot of kills, and I would imagine that that's going to be the case because the Rangers are easier to focus down than the more heavily armoured Cardland crossmen. So 330 from that unit of crossbows from Mac Thorn. For Von Mountain, the MVPs, again, Sharpshooters getting over 400 kills. So it goes to show how important crossbows can be for Cardland. For Arsal, 397, again, all the Miniskirithnan sharpshooters, so yeah, a real trend is emerging here. And again, just shy of 400 kills for the Miniskirithnan sharpshooters. Just over 250 for the Dunedain Rangers though, so again, those Cardland crossbows really proving to be the anchor of the Cardland assaults all the time. They would send forward some fairly cheap chaff infantry, and then they would back it up with crossbows and do damage to the runic line, and over time that paid dividends. I'm sure Rune will be kicking themselves over not using those Rangers sooner, because by the time that they were revealed, it was too late. Yeah, well played to both factions. Another RP battle. Hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.